You've written fiction, you've written nonfiction, you've written film. What kind of talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses that you feel like? How do you approach the different types of works? You mentioned limitations and things like that. So what are the limitations? What can you do? I mean, here that you couldn't do, and obviously there's lots, but just from the creative side, what do you think?
We actually are finishing up our first independent feature film, just narrative feature, and we're in the tail end of post-production on that story.
Okay.
And so we've now, after this, we went into a big full-length production. And while I'm still writing novels and we're pursuing film, the most notable creative differences for me are a clock on the wall in a film. It's both your time is running and also your dollars spent. And it's a team sport. So when I write a novel, I am in charge of delivering final product to a reader, like to the person who's going to actually engage with it. I take everything from my weird dream to the outlining process, to the pitch to the publisher, to the completion of the manuscript, the whole editing process, and then here it is, and it goes to the reader. In a film, I started by writing screenplays and realized that was very much like making up a recipe on an index card.
Yeah.
And you give it to somebody else, so then they can do whatever they want. And so then I thought, okay, I drifted further into directing as the storytelling portion of this. And then that felt like you're the guy telling the story, like shaping this for the viewer. And then from there I realized, no, it's actually the editor.
Yeah.
The one in the room at the end who's putting the final touches on this assembly, that's the storyteller.
Yeah.
So there's all these phases, and there's teams, there's crew, there's people who can ruin everything.
Yeah.
And then in any given 5 minutes, and believe me, they try.
That's right. That's why you pay them.
They try, yeah. So we had a van in the river. We had, there's all sorts of things. We had a fire incident in Hound of Heaven when we were lighting the poster, the Andy Warhol pop art poster of the actress at the end, lighting that on fire. All sorts of fun things.
Yeah, you tend to have fire problems when you light things on fire. That happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
When the wrong person is lighting them on fire.
Okay.
Stay there. Water sets, like building water sets, and the guy actually sealing the water set can ruin everything.
Yeah.
There's all these different phases where the entire team comes out, and the whole team has to be unified and going with a common goal towards a common end. And for that reason, I love film. For that reason, it's like playing football. And I love writing novels. But writing a novel is like going on an endurance hike by yourself. It's like, see you later. I'm going to be in a different world for 6 months. And none of you are going to have any idea what I'm doing or thinking or feeling, because I'm going to be over here, just gone. And eventually I'll come back. And then a year later, you all can read it. But it's this intensely isolationistic art form, which is great.
Yeah.
But film is fun to create. And then on the potency side, I think film hits harder initially than disappears. And so I think the written word is always going to outlast visual art forms.
Interesting.
It has more longevity. It's like you're working with stone.
Yeah.
And film is this
consumable.
It's something that can be used and used and used, but it starts to decay very quickly.
Okay.
Where Huckleberry Finn doesn't.
Right. So that's it. So because I was going to ask about that. Like, so ancient Greeks had their epic poetry, Elizabethans had their stage, Victorians got their novels, Americans have their short stories, and then now we've got film. Is film kind of in terms of creativity, film and television, is that where kind of our cultural artifact, art form, and do you think, so as you think about, so you're gifted, you've been called to create and to use your imagination and to give and to shape imagination. That's why all these people are here. You have to decide where you're going to spend your time. Do you spend all of the time doing, navigating the team sport, or do you just go hole up in a room somewhere so that we can have more, Ashtown novels?
Both. The answer is both.
Okay. So how do you gauge? So you think they both have a continued potency? You think the novel is continuing to have that?
I think the novel is going to be much longer lived. For example, a lot of you probably like the Lord of the Rings movies, but it is a great joy and blessing to me to know that they're not long for this world. I've hated them from the announcement of Peter Jackson with the Fellowship of the Ring. I have hated these things. And my only reassurance is, don't worry, they'll go away.
Uh-huh.
And they will, and the books will still be here.
Right.
And there will be another film version and another film version, and the film version is temporal. It's a fleeting incarnation of a story that will last.
Okay.
Even when films are really successful, the things that last culturally are the words.
Yeah.
The lines
that we
like the
quote to each
lines,
other.
the speeches,
Right.
Mel Gibson yelling freedom.
Right.
It's like that.
Yeah.
Like it's a word. It's just
Yeah.
a word, but it was packaged in this flesh, this incarnation with the score and the shot, the cinematography.
Yeah.
But the word, the written portion of it, will outlast the visual portion of it always.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so maybe shift gears a little bit. I want to go kind of personal for a minute. So you've
great.
Yeah. So
Don't make me go personal back.
yeah, I'll punt. So you can't do that. So you've education-wise, classical Christian education. Your dad starts a school when you're 3,
Yep.
and sort of sends you to the roller rink. I heard you telling earlier, roller rink to get educated.
Yeah.
And then your dad starts a college.
Just so you know, the school was in a roller rink.
Yeah, so it wasn't.
I didn't have skates on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's still actually that's the building.
Yeah, my
they
kids
just converted it into.
My kids are in the
school.
same building.
Yeah. So your dad starts a classical Christian school. Then you've got New St. Andrews, which your dad also helped to found as your college experience. Then you go off to St. John's and do an MA there before finally coming back and getting into it. How did all of that education, what did that education do for you as a storyteller? I know it's a broad question. You can go wherever you want. But how did the educational from the young age all the way up to the masters? What did those do in terms of fueling this desire to I want to do this stuff? I want to be a storyteller. I want to create stories.
The masters just made me really impatient. Filled up my time with stupid discussions about Thomas Hobbes and Kant.
Yeah.
So it was great.
Yeah. Okay.
But actually, and the further away I get from it, the more I appreciate it. But at the time, it just made me very impatient to be writing, to be trying to create.
Okay.
The bachelor's was very helpful in many, many ways. But from New St. Andrews, the thing I took that's been the most valuable to me was just go, 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 go. You can do more than you think. Heaping on difficult, rigorous challenges educationally.
Okay.
And then integrating them, forcing you to integrate them. So that's something that carries through to the present day. So if I'm working at 3 a.m., it's probably because of my NSA experience.
Right, yeah. You had lots of practice.
Yeah, that's where all that came
You hear
from.
that, students? That's what we're trying to do for you. We're trying to get you to where you can do stuff at 3 a.m. Okay.
Yes. And at the time, I thought, man, I can't wait till I'm out of college and I never have to pull an all-nighter again.
Yeah, and
I probably have more all-nighters this year than any
yeah.
previous.
Okay.
And I'm going to pull one again tonight just for fun.
Just for fun, yeah. We're going to stay up, swapping manly stories.
Yeah, no, it's awful. I hate them, but I do them. So NSA was work ethic, honestly, creative work ethic, and work ethic is associated with integration and the pursuit of knowledge. So a impatient hunger to know more, an impatient hunger to read more, to connect more, to read this and contrast it with that, and to go, 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 go. And the Logos school is the name of the school that I attended, K through 12, was really just how to think, how to process, how to approach education.
Yeah.
And it was in 5th grade there, the end of 5th grade into 6th grade, where I knew I wanted to write, and that's what I was going to do.
Yeah, so that, if I recall, so I know we've talked about this before, and I've heard you in interviews talk about, so you're a pretty picky reader. Like you have very particular tastes.
Yeah.
Like you've talked about stories or soul food. They're food that they feed our souls.
Yeah.
And it feels like I've got a son who just won't eat anything but mac and cheese. There's like a very narrow range of things that
we can
really,
talk about that later.
Okay, yeah. So, but
I'll help you out on that.
Okay,
one.
you can help me with that. Okay, but
just put ketchup on it. Deter him.
But you seem like a pretty picky. So when you were reading, even as a kid, like what was it that was so frustrating to you about the stories that you read? Like what were the things that you were looking for that you weren't finding, or that you found in very few places, that kind of prompted you to say, I want to do this because I want to write stories?
Okay, I think the answer to all of those questions is simply C.S. Lewis.
Okay, that was. So you liked C.S. Lewis, and
the end.
And the end. Nobody else could measure.
Yeah,
it.
so Lewis and Tolkien.
Okay.
And when I would be forced to read Where the Red Fern Grows, it wasn't Lewis or Tolkien.
That's right.
And then they hand me My Side of the Mountain, and it's also not Lewis or Tolkien. Like, it just, so it's, and the biggest thing is it wasn't doing what Lewis and Tolkien were doing. I loved Lloyd Alexander, I loved some other authors, but they all were things that echoed the same kind of soulful.
Yeah, so what was it? What was Lewis and Tolkien doing for fifth grade Nate Wilson that made you go, more of this? What like, how would you talk about that?
Lewis and Tolkien have nothing to do with self-discovery. It's never self-discovery. And YA fiction and middle grade fiction for children is almost always self-discovery.
Figure out who you are.
Yeah, just a coming of age story, which means, you're super
zeroing
special.
in on this really awful, like your junior high years, which is the time of your life you're trying to forget for the rest of your life. It's just nobody liked junior high.
And there's lots of great authors out there not doing that, but I felt like I'm sick of this kid already. I hate this kid. Just
in the book.
I like Eustace better than I like this kid. This kid's supposed to be the hero. Yeah. So and because Lewis sent his characters into a meat grinder, he sent them into adventures. The adventures happen to them and they respond to them. He's following the classic fairy tale construction, which Chesterton described as, the classic fairy tale is a normal kid, normal, easy to connect to, a symbol of all of us, a totem of all of us, of all children, is, steps out their front door and then the world goes nuts.
Yeah.
The world goes mad.
Right.
Normal kid, world goes mad, and the modern novel is about this, the kid is always super unique or trying to be unique or super special. Or in the adult market, nuts. The protagonist of the adult literary novel is insane, depressed, troubled.
Yeah.
The world is very boring and normal, and the character's insane. The character's mad. That's the Chestertonian divide. And you can see that trickle down into a lot of young adult fiction.
Right.
So I was in fifth grade hating books and hating to read new books because they weren't doing what those books were doing. They didn't live up to the standard of really just like harmonic, the way those novels sing, the way Narnia resonates, the way Middle-earth resonates and sings on a whole new level. It makes you look at the stars differently.
Yeah. So it's interesting because on the one hand, a boring world, but I'm special and trying to discover how special I am or discovering something about myself.
In monotony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the same time,
my school is so boring.
Yeah.
I'm annoyed at my little sister. I'm, this, that, the other thing.
Yeah, it's very, and on the other hand, you get stories where the world goes crazy. Everything's nuts. It's this really weird place. Yeah. And in the process, you actually become a real person. Yeah. So you become more of a person.
You react and are changed. You must become active. You must rise up and be refined.
Right.
And that's what I loved in those stories. So I really hated reading anything else. And my dad kind of channeled my pickiness into creative criticism. So I'd read the awful book, and he would let me complain about it only if I would say, this is how I would write it. Like, this is what I would do with the character. This is how I would change the ending. I would add pirates in chapter 2. I would kill this girl immediately.
There's a big bus.
This story is all about the dog.
Yeah.
So I started engaging with what I was reading less and less like a reader and more like an editor or an author. Just because he was telling me to, so I wouldn't just sit at the dinner table in the fifth grade saying, like, I hate this book so much. And he forced me into, here's where this book is making all these mistakes. This is what I would do. This is how I would write it.
So build something.
And it really took 1 year of that before I just said, I'm making it my own. Let's do this. So that was that moment.
Okay, so shifting to kind of the now you're an adult, you're a Christian, and you're doing what's often called the arts, right? So film and movies and stories and all that kind of stuff. I've heard this phrase. I think I heard your dad use it. I think I've heard you use it, and so I want you to just comment on it. So I'll use the phrase, and then you can react. Cape and beret problem. What is that? Yeah,
that's my reaction.
That's right. Cape and beret problem with Christians in the arts. That's one. I've got another one.
The cape and beret problem is not just with Christians in the arts. It's with any human and the arts.
Okay.
It's this deep desire to be
meaningful.
Special.
Okay.
Meaningful, to be existing on a deeper plane, usually to be very tortured. and very, just oh so thoughtful, possibly French. It's just
That's right. Yeah.
so.
I've met that guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another way to put it is mustache twirly. The little.
Yeah. This thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like you're twirling your mustache, if you have one or if you don't. But it's the Cape and Bray problem is when you're striving for self-importance, when you're striving for meaning, when you want to be a celebrity, when you want fame, when you want anything like, you want people to see you and respect you, you want them to think highly of you.
Yeah.
And really, artists, I firmly believe, need to view themselves as lunch ladies, short order cooks, UPS drivers.
Okay, so explain that. What do you mean? I think I get what you're saying.
So
at least I hope so. But,
you're trying to feed people. You're trying to make food for people. When I tell a story, I don't want to write a novel that's all about me. And I hope you all think that I really hope that you think I'm important.
Right.
I'm writing this so that you'll read it and say, ooh,
yeah,
he's really thoughtful, or he's so clever. That's not the goal. The goal is to serve a bunch of mac and cheese. The goal is to put food on plates, to feed imaginations, to catechize souls, put on your apron and get messy and serve up a bunch of food for as many people as possible. Right. You hope it's edifying. You hope it feeds. It's all about them.
Yeah.
It has to be about them. It was about us for C.S. Lewis. It was about us for Tolkien.
Yeah.
Lewis didn't write Narnia as a way to explore his inner psyche.
Right.
And that's the Cape and Bray thing. If he had, that'd be the Cape and Bray thing.
Right, and we would be reading.
So, lunch lady is not glamorous. Short order cook is not glamorous. UPS driver I'm just trying to deliver something to people. I don't care that I have weird brown shorts and weird brown socks. I don't care if I stumble and fall on the sidewalk or scrape my knee on the way. I just got to get this to the door.
Right.
I got to get this to these people.
Right.
Because I have a thing to deliver, and it's not mine.
Yeah.
This is the thing I think is valuable for them. They need this, and I'm going to try to get it to them. And I don't care if they laugh at me, if they do anything. They don't need to think I'm important. So you're a fry cook, you're a lunch lady, you're a UPS driver. That's how artists should approach their art.
Second one. This is related, but it's when Christians in particular, who often care about the arts and care about culture and want to be influential for good reasons. They want to have gospel
and
influence.
You put your eyebrows together.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Very. And they criticize and react to evangelical schlock. Right. So they look at sort of the Christian cultural output, and they just kind of do one of these, just shake their head. Oh no. And so they're embarrassed.
Which is frequently justified, by the way.
Okay. So they're embarrassed
because it's embarrassing.
So it's you go to the bookstore. I mean, I think there is like some kind of the prairie muffin fiction.
Yeah.
That's like
Amish romance.
Amish romance is like the thing to do.
Incidentally, Amish romance is huge.
So when
it is huge in the Christian market.
So just one question is, when can we look forward to the N.D. Wilson Amish romance?
I'm already writing many of them.
Okay, you've already got a couple in the hopper.
No, just under another name.
Okay.
How do you think I keep the lights on, Joe? Nobody reads my other stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
It's all Amish romance.
Right. So you got this criticism of evangelical schlock, just stuff that's it's cheesy, it's not substantive, and you're saying, okay, that's right. Then, but at the same time, you've said this, and so I want you to explain what you mean. An article, I think at Christianity Today a while back, there is 100 times more schlock and garbage in unbelieving art than in ours.
Yes.
Is that true? You really think that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then what should we think about our or prairie muffin fiction or Amish romance? Because we often feel very embarrassed. Christians who care about this stuff get really, they don't want to be Christian artists because they want to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
Okay, so just remember that the pagan world made Hot Tub Time Machine 2. And
they did
it. After Hot Tub Time Machine 1. And the thing that's funny is that Christians who are insecure about the crap that we produce, unfortunately,
will go see
they'll either go see that or they won't go see it, but they would never hang it on the neck of secularism.
Right.
They would never say, why do you guys keep making this schlock?
Right.
And they would never see it as the fruit of a worldview.
Right.
But every time a Christian does anything idiotic,
yeah,
they say, well, the problem with Christian art. And it's like, oh, you mean like Handel's Messiah? It's like you're just gonna lump that in there.
Yeah.
Old gospel music, the blues.
Yeah.
It's like,
Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Milton, even though he was a putz.
Yeah.
Still better than any of the pagan epics.
Yeah, that's right.
So they say Christian art, and they can't look past a really embarrassing stand in a bookstore.
Yeah.
That is embarrassing.
Yeah.
And they want to carry that like a millstone, like this is horrible responsibility we bear for having produced too many bad paperbacks.
Right.
But when they go through Kroger or any
Yeah.
other grocery store and they see all the horrible garbage that they're pumping out, 50 Shades, for example, or just all the other ones like it that nobody's ever heard of,
Yeah.
constantly, they don't say, look at all the schlock
Yeah.
unbelief produces.
Look at the bankruptcy of secularism, because this
Yeah.
is the sort of stuff it produces.
And unfortunately, the bankruptcy of that secularism has tainted our own creation,
Right.
which is why we make a bunch of bad stuff.
Right.
But if you look at the amount of garbage that we're producing versus the amount of garbage they're producing,
Yeah.
we're not even in the same league.
Okay. Good. So we're.
So, and also, even when a secular house publishes Gilead or publishes a great Peace Like a River,
Yeah.
publishes this amazing Christian novel, it's never tagged as Christian because
Right.
it was published by a secular house.
Right.
And so it belongs over there, and we let them take credit
Yeah.
for it. But it's this brilliant Christian guy who wrote it, and it's a brilliant story. And you should, if you haven't read it, you
Lee
should.
Finger's great
It's
stuff.
incredible. So, but that one is one
That's-
of the best I've ever read. Handel's Messiah remains,
Yeah. What it
you know,
is.
what it is, and
Yeah.
it's a product of Christianity. This
Yeah.
is Christian art. And so when they have their oratorios to come up against ours, then let's by
Best
all means
against
let's compare. And even like give me my Amish romance novel, and I'll go pull some bodice buster romance novel from a grocery store,
Yeah.
and I'm willing to bet money on the Amish romance novel that it's better
Huh. Yeah.
in the contest of garbage.
Right. Yeah.
But it's
yeah, that's right. Whose garbage
like
tastes better?
which of these is worse?
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
And it's funny, like you'll see, especially in film, you'll see Christians just wring their hands and weep about how there's too much Vaseline on the lens for some Christian film. It was just too shiny, too goopy, too
Yeah.
Hallmark Channel.
Yeah.
And it probably was. But put it up against 50 Shades.
Yeah.
Put it up against the stuff they're doing and
Boy,
tell me
yeah.
that it loses.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't. And now that's hardly a great achievement.
Right.
That
Yeah.
it's
It's like being
not
it's like being
that awful.
valedictorian of summer school. You're like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like you're valedictorian, but it's summer school. Like.
Did that happen to you?
Yeah,
I'm like, that's
yeah. I'm still.
it's not a metaphor I would have gone to.
Yeah. So
but
just it's something I've thought about extensively. I thought actually I have a short story about the valedictorian of summer school.
Perfect.
Share with you. So related to this, so I'm teaching the Great Books program here at Bethlehem College Seminary, and we're reading Brothers Karamazov early in the semester. And one of the things that struck me is the difficulty of
also a product of Christian culture.
Right.
Side note.
yeah. That, that's ours.
Yeah.
They don't get that one. Okay.
Flannery O'Connor.
Yeah.
Chesterton,
Yeah.
Lewis. Yeah.
So in that one, what struck me was the difficulty of portraying godliness or piety.
Yeah.
And so just curious, and I was thinking particularly as a Protestant, because obviously Dostoevsky, I assume, was Orthodox of some kind, being in Russia.
Don't assume that.
Well,
At least, okay, let's put it this way. He's not anymore.
Okay, that's true. This is true. But so here's the kind of thing that struck me, is that sort of the Catholics and the Orthodox have a somewhat of a kind of advantage, it felt to me. So if you're watching a movie and they're going to have some kind of spiritual crisis and they're going to put some kind of clergyman, they're going to put a guy with a little collar and they're going to have incense and it's going to be in a cathedral, because if you do the evangelical thing and it's in a big megachurch and it's Brother Billy and and he's in his office and his office has got the purpose-driven church, that's the book's not so. And in one sense, so basically what I felt like was that would be accurate. I remember I've seen movies where they tried it, where evangelicals put a Christian pastor giving sort of good advice or good counsel to someone in a crisis. Like it's the sort of thing, that's what I would say to that person in that situation. Yeah. And yet it doesn't feel substantive. It doesn't feel weighty. It doesn't feel, and so it was almost like, so what struck me was the otherworldliness of Catholicism, because it's all smells and bells, or of Orthodoxy, gave them an advantage in terms of depicting godliness? Just thought about that at all?
No.
Okay. You don't think that? Okay. So
Yeah.
okay. So here's the next.
Are you poping?
Yeah. No.
Are you gonna pope?
No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually say, does fantasy provide us with the otherworldliness? Basically, so in other words, that element of that sense of transcendent otherworldliness, does that come into play when? So thinking about what connected it for me is the same kind of feeling of otherworldliness, the substance, the weightiness. I got a little bit of that in Ashtown.
Yeah.
And so does kind of throwing it into the alternative make us feel like that stuff's real, and these mundane interactions are infused with, principalities and powers and so forth?
Yeah. So as far as the Catholic writers, and it's very easy for anybody to feel insecure. It's the grass is always greener kind of a thing.
Right.
We're over here as Protestants, so the Catholic writers must have an advantage.
Uh-huh.
Because I enjoy O'Connor's stories.
Yeah, or Tolkien or whoever.
Yeah, it's like Tolkien. Just remember, Lewis is on our team.
Yes.
But basically, as far as that goes, I think that Catholics do have an advantage when they stop the story in the right place, because Protestants love to clean it all up all the way. Like it's already just totally buffed up and shiny.
Right.
But there's this pervasive Catholic guilt.
Right.
Like they're never quite all the way forgiven.
Yeah.
They still have to spend 357 years in purgatory.
Yeah.
Before they're all cleaned all the way up. They have this. There's kind of this futility and a despair to it.
Yeah.
That in some way better emulates what Paul describes.
Right.
In terms of the old man.
Huh.
And what we love to do with Protestants with Protestant art is pretend like there's nothing else there.
Right.
So it has nothing to do with the theological foundation in Protestantism. It has to do with a fear of telling real stories with darkness.
Right.
It's a desire for the Protestant to just write Thomas Kinkade novels.
Right.
So when you look at a Thomas Kinkade painting and all the puddles are glowing,
Yeah.
clearly radioactive or something, it's this adorable, cute little thing.
Uh-huh.
And that's when we fail that way.
Right. And when they fail,
When they fail, it's Flannery O'Connor, much respect, trying to save a character by wrapping barbed wire, where he wraps barbed wire around his skin and sleeps in it and fills his shoes with broken glass to walk on them.
Right.
That's salvation.
Penance, yeah.
And that's like, but nobody then says like, boy, that's like
Yeah.
a really gross and ugly
That's
outworking.
false piety. That's
We
false
kind of
godliness.
like ignore that one.
Right.
Ignore the novel she wrote where Satan rapes a boy in the woods. Let's just kind of like, and let's just focus on these short stories, which are great. And when Protestants succeed, it's not Protestant.
Right. We don't, lose.
It's just a novel that was great.
Okay.
Peace Like a River is an example.
Yeah.
And then as far as it goes, we just have to stop doing Thomas Kinkade stuff. Just remember when the puddles are all there, they're full of bloated, dying earthworms. This is the world God made.
Yeah, that's right.
Earthworms come out by the dozen and all commit suicide on the sidewalk somehow for some reason.
That's right.
Whatever's going on.
That's right.
But there's no dead earthworms in Thomas Kinkade paintings.
Yeah.
And Protestants love to kind of just, let's make it all shiny and clean and pretend like this Protestant pastor giving great advice doesn't have his own struggles.
Right.
He's actually an angel.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
It's just, so we don't ever
Yeah.
go into the puddle. We
Yeah.
just look at the shine.
And so you can't have the beauty of the godliness because you haven't, and the courage and the substance, because there's what they're up against ain't that big of a deal.
Yeah, but to pile on the very, very end, yes, fantasy does give us the ability to show the otherworldly, to show the bigness of this world.
Right.
And I think that otherworldly might even be the wrong phrase. Fantasy gives us the opportunity to wake up to how crazy this place actually is.
Yeah.
Like, this place is nuts. This place is crazy. I can't believe God did it. Just go watch any time lapse of the night sky
Yeah.
and think, like, overdone much? It's just,
Yeah.
it's insane what we're doing. Volcanoes are blowing up in South America as we hurtle through outer space at Mach 86 on a ball of lava and water.
Yeah.
And here we go.
Yeah.
And so the fantasy can enable us to wake up,
Because it's pulling on
scrape the calluses off, and get rid of the numbness of modern man who's taking the smartphone for granted.
Yeah.
So I love fantasy for that reason.
Yeah.
Like this worldliness, like it can awake,
Yeah.
wonder of this world.
So talk to me about that a little bit. So this is a theme I think in your nonfiction and in your fiction, but kind of this relationship between magic and science.
Yeah.
Where so you mentioned the iPhone, which is kind of this magic box that I have that can magically put my wife. I can see her face, just like I can just do my little magic trick, and then there she is.
Yeah, by means of invisible waves
Right.
and crystals.
Yeah. That's right. And so so Christians get really freaked out about stories with magic sometimes.
Yes, they do.
So people, you got magic in your stories. That's necromancy. The Bible says don't do that. Don't talk about that.
I'm familiar with this.
You might have
this version of anathema.
Yeah. So you might have encountered some of these people.
Yeah.
So you're the author. Explain why. Why? So flesh that out a little bit.
Okay. The first wizard duel in all of literature happens where? In Pharaoh's court. An old man with a big beard and a stick comes in out of the wilderness and has a magic contest. Like, that's the first one. That's where Gandalf comes from. And it is, like, seriously.
It's Moses.
It's
Okay.
not even a joke. Like, it is funny, but it's like, this is where Gandalf was in the legacy of Moses. That character was created there when God did it, when he made up Moses.
Right.
And he sent Moses to do this thing. And Moses turned his stick into a snake, which ate the other sticks, which turned into snakes. Side note, they really turned into snakes.
Right. So there is
Pharaoh's magicians actually were capable of turning a dead stick into a living serpent. They were actually capable of turning a bowl of water into blood. Now, these were some bad dudes.
Yeah.
That's next level
Yeah.
craziness. You think about, like, Google can't even do that.
Yeah.
But boy, do they want to.
Yeah, they would.
And when they do, God will send in an old man and a stick. So it's this is how it goes.
That's how it goes, right?
So
yeah.
when I look at the history of the world, when I look at the story God is telling, there's magic all over the place. It doesn't stop. It never ends. It just goes and goes and goes, and there's magic all around us all the time. And what I do is use this cheap little riff on what he does in overdone tons, and I echo it slightly, and then a mom says, I'm sorry, Johnny cannot read this anymore.
Yeah.
Because you had a magical dandelion. That's a bridge too far. And it's sort of, my response is, dandelions are magic.
Right. Yeah.
Now, they're not magic in the way I described them, as far as you know.
Yeah.
But they're magical.
Right.
These things are magical. They're made out of the energy of a ball of fire. There's a ball of fire in the sky. And that's how dandelions are made. So connect those dots.
Yeah.
You put a serious science word on it, and suddenly we all feel safe. It's photosynthesis. You don't understand. It's not magical at all.
Yeah.
It's all it is this enormous heat energy coming from the ball of fire in the sky, which is causing what to happen? Like, there's this tiny little dot of a dandelion seed, which flew, parachuted, to your sidewalk crack. And then there's a star so close that it will blister your face if you sit out there too long. A star hitting that little dot in your sidewalk crack with enough energy that it begins to expand and grab air, CO2, science word, we feel safe, grabs thin air, using the star energy, splits that thin air in half, and makes a dandelion out of the carbon and releases the oxygen for you to go. And then the oxygen goes into your little wind bags in your bone cage. And the red goop grabs it and pumps it up to your thinking muscle. So it's one of those things where people have problems with magic.
Yeah.
I don't even begin to understand. Like, there was a guy named Samson.
Yeah.
Just okay.
Yeah. He was real.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like he was real.
And he was able to catch
There
the,
were giants, and there was open season on giants. If David and Jonathan heard, whoa, there's a giant up in the caves, let's kill him. And they'd go.
Yeah, right.
It's like, oh, there's
Yeah.
got to kill a giant. So I mean, this is the stuff God does. The Red Sea parted, manna fell from heaven.
Right.
Manna falls from heaven every day.
Yeah.
Like, it's just,
Yeah.
here it is.
So when,
It's like the Lord's Prayer, like, sums it all up perfectly.
so when you're talking to your kids about the world,
Yeah.
do you use the language of magic? Like, so.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Because otherwise I'd be lying.
Right. So, Dad, the moon.
Yeah.
How is it there? There's a gigantic lasso, invisible lasso that's tethered somehow to this earth, and it's looped it and it's grabbed it and it's holding it there. And then they grow up.
I'm not familiar with the lasso.
You're not. Yeah, it's called gravity.
Yeah, no, it's not. As far
No,
as
it is. That's
as a
what-
side note. Okay.
It's a gigantic lasso called
Do
gravity.
you realize the moon by itself is a very freaky thing? It's the big
I've heard.
ball.
Yeah.
The rock shines. It's like, there it is, perfectly round, sitting there, not turning. And I would like to say, have you ever doubted that there was ever a war in heaven? Just look at the scars on our moon. And think about the fact that there are craters on the side facing us. It's like, what would have to whip past us and successfully hit the moon on the inside? And of course, the outside is especially puckered. But it's just out there. Then we also allege that it causes the tides.
Yeah. That's the lasso kind of going back.
No,
and
but it
forth.
clearly doesn't.
Okay.
Okay. The moon does not cause the tides. Whatever causes the moon causes the tides also. But it's just like the moon is not a causation. The moon is a rock floating, not going away, not coming closer, attached by nothing, but just holding its place because it was told to.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there it is. And as a side note, you want to know that the moon doesn't cause the tides. All you have to know is that high tide isn't just where the moon is. It's also the opposite side of the earth going away from the moon. So anything to do with gravity at that point is just bogus. So it's the high tides go up on opposite sides with the moon over there. Water goes away as well. And if, incidentally, the moon could just heave the ocean up, which maybe it can, just think what it can do to your brain. Just
made of water.
There's a huge amount there. So yeah, I will sit there with a magnet and with my kids and say, so you feel the magnet sucking towards the refrigerator? How does it even know the fridge is there?
Lassos.
Yeah, but the key is, I'm just going to say magic.
Okay.
Magic. God, this is God's magic. This is the way God made the world.
Uh-huh.
It's like, how does the soup turn back into a butterfly once the caterpillar is melted?
Magic.
Magic.
Yeah.
God told it to.
Right. So would you tell your kids? So my kids were reading Jack and the Beanstalk,
Sure.
and so at one point they asked me, "Are there kingdoms on top of the clouds?" So if your kids read Jack and the Beanstalk, and says, "Dad, are there really giants up above the clouds?" You would say,
Absolutely. They're not that giant,
"Right."
but the winds
Well,
are
'cause Jack killed him,
The winds
but-
are his messengers.
Okay,
We
yeah.
know the winds are his messengers.
Uh-huh.
We know this is a world just teeming with
Beings.
God's grace and God's artistry. So
Mm-hmm.
I would never ever guess, based on what I know of God's personality here, oh yeah, no, that's the barren, sterile place, because God loves those. It's just
Yeah.
you try to find, you can't find those in God's art. So yes, I would say yes. Angels are like, where's heaven? They point.
Uh-huh.
There's the North Star.
Yeah.
What did Satan do that was so bad? Well, he tried to move his throne room further north than God's. Like that's
Yeah.
that's Bible. You want to see how embarrassed Christians are about magic? Look at how we translate Scripture. So you probably, unless you read one of the older translations, you wouldn't think that unicorns are in the Bible, and yet they are. And if you read in the NIV, it'll very helpfully tell you wild ox. Why? Because we know there's no such thing as unicorns, even though the word is unicorn.
Yeah. Monoceros. Yeah.
But it's going to embarrass us.
Right.
We're going to be embarrassed if we put unicorn in our Bible, because then we have to believe in unicorns, and that gets awkward. Like the Amish romance novel.
Yeah.
Unicorn. So in Job, when God says to Job, can you harness the unicorn and make him plow your fields? It's a rhetorical question. He can't. Because it's the unicorn. It's the untamable beast. So can you harness the unicorn and make him plow your fields? And we translate it, can you harness the wild ox and make him plow your fields? And Job kind of looks at us and says, yeah. What did you think I was plowing with? So and satyrs show up, dragons show up.
Yeah.
They're all over the place. And we neuter the magic because we're comfortable with the language of science. We're comfortable with materialism. We're comfortable with the lack of a spiritual plane. We're comfortable with those things because we're modernists. And so we neuter Scripture, lean away from fantasy. Fantasy is escapism for children. I don't want to write escapism. I want to write fantasy novels that wake kids up to the fact that they live in a magical place, in a magical world, in a magical time, written by a magical God.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. So when I do school tours, which I do as infrequently as possible, but just to be honest, when I do them, I frequently get asked by elementary school kids or junior high kids, if you could live in any magical world, which one would it be? And I always say, this one. Like right here. This one beats Narnia sideways. And I love Narnia. This one thumps Middle-earth. And I love Middle-earth. It's like this one, this time, this place, this magical world. I mean, I flew here.
Yeah.
See, I climbed into a metal tube. Somebody said, buckle up. And then they lit the chemicals on fire. And I hopped up into the sky.
The magic potions.
And flew here. And all I was doing was pulling the hood of my hoodie down over my face and trying to hold still and sleep. And Frodo needed an eagle. So anyway, as far as it goes, the world is a fundamentally magical place. And I write fantasy because I want to imitate the art of God. Not because I want to try to escape the art of God or lie. I don't lie to my children ever. Yeah, there's a Santa Claus, but he's dead. It's like, this is, and he's awesome. He was a great guy.
You get to meet him someday.
And he's in heaven now. And the first time one of my kids said that at Random House in New York, where somebody says, is Santa Claus bringing you anything this Christmas? And my daughter said, no, he's dead. And, they all kind of looked at me like, what did you do? And the answer is I told them the truth. So I write fantasy because I want to imitate the truth. We serve the man who walked on water and turned water into wine and healed the sick and multiplied loaves and fishes. We serve the magical word. And all of this is his artistry. All of this is, we are all his magic words.
So theological, since you're talking about biblical, don't reduce biblical metaphors to mere metaphors. Leviathan is a real creature. I'm hearing that in unicorns are real, satyrs are real, and we shouldn't apologize for these because there's crazier things that still exist, even if some of those things are gone now.
Clearly, sea monsters and Beowulf, just unrealistic. Let's watch Shark Week.
That's right. Yeah.
There are no sea monsters.
Let's go to the museum and see the dinosaurs or the dragons. I mean, but another theological question. So, God is an author. He's imitating his art. The world is a story. We're his characters.
Yes.
So I've used that in what I've written. You've used that in your books. Lewis used it before either of us did.
Yep.
You got theologians who use that. Grudem uses analogies like that in his stuff. Is that a good model, you think, for thinking about God's relationship to the world? Like that's a helpful way for us to think about how God relates to all of this author story.
Absolutely. Especially because it's very easy for modern secularized Christians who began to assume the assumptions, the axioms of materialism, who deny the potency of the spiritual aspect of this world and God's creation. They think they're in a machine that sort of got wound up and is just going. It's a material machine. It's very easy for them to feel abandoned, to feel like God is distant. And you'll hear Christians say things like, why doesn't God speak today? Why doesn't, I've ever heard that. Why doesn't he speak today? Why doesn't he speak in the way he used to? The answer is he does. Loud and clear. Like it's right now, the planet is sucking me down and I'm able to balance because he's still speaking. If he stopped speaking me, I would cease to exist immediately. I don't hold myself in existence. It's like, I don't. If I walk outside and there's a red-winged blackbird that flies by, that's him talking. That's him talking audibly, visually in my presence. He crafted it with his words. He spoke it. He created it. He sent it. There it is. He's working his art right now in our presence. Clouds, weather, wind, smells, everything is him talking, him creating by the word in the present immediately. I think it's really important to see it as verbal art because it is verbal art.
Right.
And when you realize that it's spoken art, then he's still speaking.
Yeah.
And he's here.
Yeah.
It's just he's very hard to control.
Right. Yeah. You don't get to.
So you have your little petty stupid thing that you're worried about. You'd like an immediate answer to your prayers. I have a thing at work today, God, and God says, squirrel fight. And you say, no, okay. I will not acknowledge how amazing that is, as these tree rats chase each other. It's like, I have this thing at work today, and he throws a cumulonimbus in front of the star that's right there. You know, it's like it's the big ball of fire in the sky, which you say, it's bright, and you put on your special things to shield yourself from it.
Right.
So I mean, we numb ourselves all the time.
So when I've used that, the immediate objection is, well, but characters and stories aren't real, right? So I'm curious, as an author, so you've written stories.
That's really depressing.
Yeah, I know, that's right. Yeah, but you create Cyrus Smith, you create Henry, you create all these different characters, and you're the author. What's your relationship like to them? Like, do you have an attachment to them? How does that work? I've not done that, so I'm...
Yeah, you do have an attachment to them, and you must have an attachment to them in order to be effective. But when I've used this example, and I use it a lot, especially when we talk about the problem of evil, when people say, how could an all-good God allow evil in this world? You know that it's broken logically if Bilbo could use the same syllogism to prove that there was no Tolkien.
Yeah.
How could a good author allow Gollum?
Right.
Clearly, there is no author.
Right.
It breaks down very quickly.
Right.
So as far as it goes, when people say, well, the problem is I'm real and Hamlet isn't, I'm real and a character in a story isn't, the thing that's amazing is the relationship between myself and my characters is a much closer gap.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a human, and this is a product of human imagination, ink on a page, and I send it into other people's brains, and they imagine it as well and differently. But so this is a finite thing, and I'm a finite thing.
Yeah.
The gulf between myself and God is infinite.
Right.
Like the distance between God and his characters. We like to think that we're so much more important than characters in a book.
Yeah. But compared to
the ratio
God
is what you have to look at.
Yeah,
like,
right.
The ratio between a human author and these characters in a book is this big, and the ratio between a human character and the infinite creator God is unbridgeable.
Right.
Except for the power of the incarnation and the magic of the incarnation.
Right.
But the ultimate trump there, where he bridged the gap and met his characters in his art.
So, Tolkien, you like Tolkien?
I do. Although he was a total curmudgeon.
He was a total
and
curmudgeon.
wrong about many things. But go ahead.
Okay, so is this one of the things he's wrong about? He's got this. He's got Leaf by Niggle, which I'm assuming you're familiar with. And in the story, Niggle's a painter, and he spends his whole life trying to paint this perfect leaf, and then discovers after he dies that God makes his leaf real. Right.
Yeah.
There's the thing he was trying to create, and it's better than he'd even thought. And the tree's all there and all that kind of stuff. So I just ruined that story for you if you've never read it. Sorry.
Spoiler.
Yeah, spoiler.
The guy
alert.
dies.
Dang, yeah, the guy dies. Very sad.
Like everyone else.
But it seems like there's this, God makes his creation, his sub-creations real. Do you think that's true? Do you think so? Do you think God's going to make your sub-creations real? You're going to meet Cyrus Smith in heaven in some way? Okay.
No. I'm not that nuts.
You're not that nuts.
Yeah.
But if they did, would you be upset?
Yeah.
Okay, you'd be a little bit. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, of course I would be.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it'd be horrible to be the actual real product of my imagination.
Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
A horrendous curse.
You'd just be apologizing forever. Okay.
I'm really sorry.
Okay,
yes.
I was just curious. So, love for Tolkien. I thought, hey, Tolkien thinks that, I kind of get the sense Tolkien thinks there's going to be hobbits in heaven, which, could be cool.
Tolkien's a true Platonist.
Yeah.
And a weirdo. In that regard.
So,
and I really enjoy the thought experiment. But no, I don't think for things to have existed here, including human characters, that there
Right.
needs to be an actual, real form of them
In the
in the spirit plane heaven.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I don't believe
Okay.
that, which is what he would.
Yeah, right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about culture war. Okay. So
Go fight, win.
go fight, win. So your dad regularly says things. Doug Wilson says things like this: you can't fight a tank war without tanks. You can't fight a naval war without a navy, and you can't fight a culture war without a culture. So how would you relate what you're doing to that kind of statement? So you're trying to in order to be involved in a culture war, we have to have something to fight from and fight for and fight with.
Yeah.
So how would you say the stories that you're writing, the imagination that you're creating or offering to other imaginations, how do you see that fitting into the kind of day and age in which we live, church that's kind of struggling to figure out this topsy-turviness in the broader world? How does what you're doing relate to
Well,
that?
an army marches on its stomach.
Okay.
And what I'm doing is trying to feed imaginations.
Okay.
I'm trying to feed people, real people,
Uh-huh.
humans. And I'm trying to inspire them with the things that should be inspiring. I'm trying to damn the damnable and honor the honorable.
Yeah.
I'm trying to catechize their loyalties and their instincts, their instincts towards self-sacrifice rather than self-preservation. There's all sorts of Darwinistic, individualistic nonsense that shows up in a lot of stories that are out there. Self-preservation is the ultimate good. Survival is the ultimate good. It's counter-story.
Right.
It's food.
Okay.
So I'm trying to feed people. I'm trying to keep them from being starved
Right.
by the opposition.
Yeah.
And also I'm trying to keep them from being fed by lies,
By false food. So
which will hopefully equip them and inspire them to live real lives
yeah.
faithfully. I mean, I can take all sorts of inspiration still from Narnia.
Uh-huh. Right.
And you can still see yourself when you're becoming Eustace.
Yeah. Right.
You
Yeah.
know, it's like there's a lot of grooming and catechizing that goes in great narratives, and I want to try to contribute to that. I want to add myself onto in the back of the rail car diner.
Yeah.
You know, the short order cook, like you're trying to feed well.
So when in for example in Ashtown, it gets fairly explicit in its Christianity.
Yeah.
Right. So you know, so spoiler alert, sorry everybody if you've not read Ashtown yet, but
The author is a Christian.
The author is a Christian, and you got references to Passover and blood and that's blood that protects you and
Justice
and
wrath,
wrath, which can be, which in ourselves is frightening and will destroy us, but protected the right way, they become our friends and things like that. So. So one question is, do the publishers? So you're working with Random House, you're working with secular publishers. Do they get how Christian it is? Like, does that register with them? And what's that reaction like?
Yeah, they do, but it's at the same time, it's not the publishers it's an industry and they want readers. Mm-hmm. If people stopped reading my books, then they want to stop publishing me.
Uh-huh.
As long as people are reading my books,
they don't care.
They're great.
Yeah.
And they have a great platform, and
they've
in many ways have been terrific to work with.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that, I don't believe in secular neutral infrastructures.
Right.
But there are good people in all these things. It's one of those things where we just attribute that whole industry to the other team.
Yeah.
It doesn't belong there. The world is much messier than that.
Yeah.
So it's not the other team. It belongs to God. It's in God's world.
Huh.
Like this is all His.
Uh-huh.
And in there are people who agree with me, people who disagree with me, and people who are good friends and we can argue, and people who see what I'm doing and know, and immediately like, oh, hey, there's this Christianity coming out, and people who just say, well, that was an exciting story, and that's all they care about.
Right.
Then there's people who will cuss me out because of what I did.
Yeah.
Although they're far more. That's not internal to Random House. That's
just people who read the books.
It's a critic. One critic, after a thing in New York, came up and cussed me out on the stage while I was stepping off. Like she got there fast enough, and made me very happy. And I felt all warm.
That's right.
For days.
Yeah.
And that actually was specifically about Lee Pike Ridge.
Yeah.
Lee Pike Ridge. It's my first book. Kid goes into the grave for 3 days. Then there's a chapter called Easter. Then he comes out.
I think I've read that story before. Yeah.
So, and there's lots of other things to the story, but there's a shape there, and that's what she was upset about. She said she woke up beautifully. It was like 3 days later. she woke up realizing what I had done and was just furious with me.
Because you
It took her
tricked her. She liked the
And
book
so
until she realized.
she went at me while I was still on the steps, and she was cussing at me, and you like that beeping C.S. Lewis. And I told her, I was like, the chapter's called Easter.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to con anybody. This wasn't.
Yeah, well, there was
I wasn't
no
like
trick.
tiptoeing,
Yeah.
sneaky.
Uh-huh.
But people who disagree with me love the stories, and
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah.
It's like people like gospel music.
Right.
They might not believe the gospel, but they like gospel music.
Right. So when in our present moment, when you kind of got Christians find themselves in positions of influence or whatever, and then all of a sudden somebody really notices, and it becomes kind of like the 2 minutes of hate, right? So how do you think about that as someone who's positioned in this world where you got friends who like what you do, and then there's others who like that lady who don't?
Most of the people who'd be mad at me, they're angrier at me for having 5 children than they are for putting an Easter chapter in a book.
Right. Yeah.
And they should be.
And they should be right. Yeah. Yeah.
The children are a bigger deal.
Yeah.
Well, you can finish your question.
So the question was, so you're in a situation. So it feels like we're in a situation. I think there's probably people who aren't authors, but are just in work for companies who someday they might figure out that you guys really mean this. You really believe this stuff. You believe that book is true, right? Yeah. And that what it says goes, and that God is God and we're not. And so as you think about that, how do you look forward in that situation and prepare for it? Or do you prepare for it? Or do you just say, Lord, make me ready when I get there? Or do you actually think about, if it becomes a big deal, like we're not going to publish your books anymore because you're an evangelical, you're a Christian.
Sure.
How do you do you game plan that stuff at all? Or is it just kind of, I'll wait and see if that happens?
Well, that's a possibility, but it really is, like I said, it's as long as the books are selling.
Right.
There's a reason why HarperCollins bought Thomas Nelson.
Right.
And Zondervan.
Yeah.
And Random House bought Waterbrook.
Yeah.
It's just...
They want to sell books.
They want to sell books, and Christians buy books. So that doesn't scare them.
Right.
In that way. Now, at the same time, a while back, right when I was first getting started, there were some vicious rumors that I was a Christian.
Vicious rumors.
And my editor heard enough from people who were concerned that he had to ask me to write a statement of faith.
Okay.
That Random House could have on file.
Okay.
That they could say, well, no, he doesn't think that. Because it was all weird bugaboo, like people who didn't have a clue what I actually believed.
Right.
It was, some crazy Christianity.
Yeah.
So I had to write a statement of faith for Random House.
And they've got it in a drawer
He had to have on file. He didn't have to. I don't think he's moved on now, but I don't think he had to use it much after the first couple of years. But he had to have one because people would be upset, and he needed to be able to consult and be like, no, that's not what he said. Like, this is what he thinks. Or, let me send this to you.
Okay. So there was some
respond. And it was. I always planned on writing Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl, which is very much like a manifesto of faith book.
Right.
I always planned on writing it a little later in life.
Right.
I thought, okay, I'm going to get going. I'm focusing on novels and film right now. Maybe when I'm 40, I'll write this.
Yeah.
Move into some nonfiction. And then that happened.
Yeah.
And it was because people, the power was in the suspicion. The power was in, is he trying to hide something?
Right.
Like, we hear he's a Christian. We hear this, we hear that. And that just made Tilt-A-Whirl very important to write right then.
Sure.
And so I did. So I wrote Notes from the Tilt-A-Whirl then, published it with Thomas Nelson. And
so that you can point to it and say,
that's this manifesto of faith.
There's
nothing secretive about it. And I think it's, to anybody in any occupation, that's really important that you not find yourself in a place where you're saying, oh no, I hope they don't find out.
Right.
If you, that's such a weird power you give to somebody. It's like being blackmailed over something that you shouldn't be ashamed of.
Right.
But you let it work anyway. You need to just lean in and pop the bubble.
Yeah.
Make it obvious.
And then trust
and
God.
One of the things my dad has advised guys going into the military, where he just said, when you get on the destroyer, first thing, say, hey, I'm a Christian. Who else is a Christian? Just throw it out there immediately. Go on the record immediately, wherever you are, and fly the flag. And the hunt is canceled.
Yeah.
There's nothing to hunt for.
Right. Yeah. Be not.
The fight. There might be a fight later, but no hunt.
but you don't have to be afraid of it.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with the fact? So over Christmas break, I was given Boys of Blur, which is a recent standalone that you wrote. Football Swamp Monster fusion, which is always one. I've been looking for one.
Yeah,
and
a lot of people have.
Yeah. So I'm glad you filled that niche. I tried out 2 or 3 others, but yours is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So I've been. Given,
I was asked to write an Amish romance.
And instead
I gave them football and swamp monsters.
That's right. Yeah. But I read it like in a couple of hours.
That's your fault.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just kind of, it's over Christmas break. I got nothing else to do. So you kind of scarf the book. How do you feel about that as an author? Because I thought about it afterwards. Like I read it and I knew I'd read it again because I enjoyed it. But as an author, you spent 6 months or however long pouring yourself into these characters and the story and trying to make it work. And then there's the editorial and there's all this effort. And then you give the books and then you got people like me who are going to go, to the food, more please.
Yeah.
Like.
But I think like.
Faster, man.
But hasn't every mom experienced that?
Yeah, okay, that's right. So you're just identifying with your wife.
You put it on the table and then they ate it. It's like,
that's right.
It's gone.
That's right. I guess I got to go.
The beautiful apple pie is gone.
That's right. And I'm going to go cook some more tomorrow.
Yeah, it's just,
okay.
There's a futility to it, and that's part of the beautiful.
Okay.
I mean,
so you just embrace that. You say they're going to scarf it, and they're going to want more, and that's why you do it.
The hope is, the real hope is that, that they'll enjoy it, that it will edify, like an apple pie.
Right.
Swamp monster football apple pie. And that it will edify, and then it will last, because there will be other kids. You'll meet somebody who's hungry.
Yeah.
And you'll say, oh, here. And they get one meal out of it.
Right.
It's like, and then they have a kid.
And they have a new
and there's a next generation. There's somebody else. And at this point, I would read in college when I was, actually, I think it was after grad school, and it was kind of, I can't place this story. I was busy and I had serious work. I think I was reading City of God way too quickly by Augustine.
Yeah, you shouldn't. That's true.
And I'd get up to speed, and I was speed reading, which is stressful. And I was, dragging a pencil down the page and going high speed. And every couple hours, I would need to just decompress.
Yeah.
Like cool off, pour some water on my head. And so I would set City of God down, and I'd pick up a Narnia Chronicle.
Yeah.
And I would read it, and it would be done.
Yeah.
Like literally just because I'd have this RPM going.
Yeah.
And so pick it up and just you go through it and you put it down. And it's like, okay, and you pick this one back up.
And it's refreshing.
And I was reading hundreds and hundreds of pages, and the decompression was to pick up more pages.
Different pages.
And cool it off. And I was reading a Narnia Chronicle a day, just in the gaps.
Right.
And I've read Narnia so many times.
Right.
And each time I can scarf it like that. I can sit and read it to my kids, though, and it's renewable. Like it comes back, and here it is again, and then here it is again. And so, it can be really funny. And I always joke with kids, like some kid will come up to me, most recently, like in a Costco, and tell me how fast they read the book. They're all so proud of how fast they read it. And I'll tell them, like, stop it. Like, it took me 6 months. And you're like, 3 hours and 45 minutes. They're very proud of it.
Yeah.
But that's a great thing.
Right.
If they enjoyed it, it's a great thing. It fed them. I got the package to the door.
Yeah.
The meal was received.
That's a win.
And I got to be content with that. That's the cape and beret could get all upset. Like, treat it with some dignity, please.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
do
you realize how long I slaved over this macaroni?
You
just don't want to go there.
So, a couple questions about Ashtown, which is your series that's still unfinished, and
one more to go.
One more to go. So I'm going to ask, because everybody's probably wondering, when's the last one going to be out? When can we look forward to that? Do you have a time frame?
Before I die.
Before you die. Okay.
And
hopefully sooner.
Yeah. It's called The Silent Bells.
The Silent Bells.
Is the title of Ashtown 4. I am working on it.
Okay.
And I will get it out.
And you will get it out.
I don't know when.
Don't know when.
It will come.
But it's there.
Otherwise, I'll be in so much trouble.
That's right.
And this is the most frequent. I mean, this is the multiple questions per day from around the country. Where's Ashtown 4? Where's Ashtown 4? People are mad at me for Boys of Blur.
Yeah. Like, why did you waste our time
Yeah, it's just
on this
where is
really
Ashtown
good book?
4?
Yeah, okay.
Where's Ashtown
Okay.
4? So it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And you can rest easy that it will, because otherwise my own children and my nieces and nephews will take me out behind the woodshed.
That's right. Yeah, you'd
So-
be in real trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, so in those stories, you've got these.
There are 3. Can we focus on that? I've done 3.
You've done 3. Okay.
Joe, there are 3.
There are 3 whole books. They're
And they're
actually pretty
long.
thick. Yeah, they're long.
Fat.
They're out there. Okay.
There's 3
You
of
should
them.
read them.
Let's focus on the positive.
That's right.
3 snacks for you.
2 heroes, 2 main heroes, Cyrus and Antigone Smith.
Yeah.
And they kind of get the normal kids had some rough times, but then they get kind of swept up.
Yep.
You were talking about earlier, this fairy tale kind of.
Yeah.
So maybe just set the plot a little bit, and then I have some questions about what you've done with those characters. So just maybe give a short synopsis that won't give too many spoilers away or whatever that you don't want to do.
Everybody dies. So two kids, actually, it's actually 3.
Yeah.
But a brother and sister live in a rundown motel called the Archer Motel outside of Oconomowoc, Wisconsin.
So it's up here. This is like, I mean, on the other side of
Yes,
Wisconsin.
Oconomowoc was picked because every other letter is an O.
Uh-huh.
And that's awesome.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I was in a school.
Here in Minnesota, we like to lengthen our O's.
Yeah,
That's how they do it.
it's incorrect.
Sorry.
So I was in a school in Oconomowoc, and I commented on how awesome the every other O was, and they all seemed like, it's kind of a boring place.
Uh-huh.
And I told them, like, okay, I'm starting my next book in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And so I did. So Oconomowoc, Wisconsin is where Ashtown Burials kicks off. Brother, sister, Cyrus and Antigone Smith live in a rundown, deserted motel that was inherited. And their older brother, Daniel, tries to make a good showing of it and take care of them.
Because their dad's dead.
Dad's dead, mom's in a hospital, and here they are.
Okay.
And so he's trying to take care of them. Cyrus is a problem. Antigone's that bossy older sister, Tiggs. And an old friend of their father shows up. And this is basically the beginning's is echoing Treasure Island.
Yeah.
The Admiral Benbow Inn. I've got the Archer Motel. Billy Bones shows up. William Skelton, nicknamed Billy Bones, has a skeleton tattooed on the outside of his body, very tastefully.
Uh-huh.
And he's a member of this order of explorers, founded by the Irish monk Brendan the Navigator, real guy, who sailed across the Atlantic in a leather boat, because that was also very reasonable.
Uh-huh.
And so Brendan the Navigator, at the time, so the mythology behind it is that Brendan the Navigator and his cohorts in ministerial crime were collecting the darkest, worst things in the world. All the evil. They're up against the evil. The baddies, the unkillables, the horrible relics, all these things, and they're quarantining them at the farthest reaches of the world.
Which
was, at the time, the banks of Lake Michigan in Wisconsin. Like they're coming from Europe and Ireland, and they're going to the middle of this continent where there's nothing, and they have this place called Ashtown where they are burying these horrible things.
Great Britain has Australia. They send all the convicts there.
So
the Order of Brendan sends
the
it to
monks of the
Wisconsin.
Order of Brendan, pre-Reformation, of course, are bringing all these things over and locking them up in Ashtown. And so the series is called Ashtown Burials. So these kids in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, get inducted into this Order of Explorers, the Order of Brendan. But now the Order of Brendan has reached its zenith and gone into its decay of unbelief. So it's this
compromised.
It's this compromised, like this social structure. There's wealth, there's power, there's influence, there's a few true believers. I imitated some aspects of what you see in some corners of Catholicism, but more what you see in Judaism. There's some yarmulke guys, there's the black hats and the ringlets. There's the Brendanites who are all in, kind of crazy.
Fundamentalists, crazies.
And then you just have the secular people who are running the show of this one-time great religious organization. But it has all these things under the surface buried and locked up.
Transmortals and immortals, who you actually, so one of the questions is you blend kind of reality and fantasy. You've talked about that a little bit. Part of the goal of what you're doing is trying to wake people up. And in this book, it's kind of like, Tamerlane was a real guy. There are, you don't need to go to fantasy to have real villains. Maximilian Robespierre in the French Revolution was a really horrible, horrible person.
And here he is in your children's book.
In your children's book, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of, you twist it because you make these guys, transmortals or immortals who kind of live forever and reappear under different guises throughout history.
They also have animals, but the animals are also real. So giant alligator snapping turtles, giant dragonflies. The biggest dragonfly wing they have fossilized is something like 18 inches. So on a dragonfly, 18-inch wing, which means you're talking about a wingspan of a dragonfly this size, which means the head and thorax is basically the size of a small football. Bear in mind that they're carnivorous. And that the nymphs, which are also carnivorous, would have been like this size, swimming around underwater, chomping things. So I'm pulling real things from this world in, and here they are contained and used. These kids get brought in, whip spiders show up, which are real. These are just accentuated, and they now pack hunt. So these kids get brought in, and they're being trained up, and they have to find the true belief. They have to find what is the heart of this organization and mission, and where should they be going, what should they be doing. And as is the case in the story of the Messiah and all these other places, they have to start by dealing with the dead wood of the religious infrastructure.
Right.
So the dead wood of the believers, the ones who are sitting here waiting for the Messiah and have been waiting for generations, are the ones who trot him through the kangaroo trial to get him killed.
Right.
It's like they're the keepers.
Yeah.
It's like the steward of Gondor in
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, exactly.
Right.
So Denethor is sitting here keeping it for the king. I'm just holding it for the king, except for he's not.
Right. Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I'm trying to merge the real and the imaginary to have people be stunned and surprised that this really happened. John Smith shows up, Captain John Smith shows up in the stories, and he has a family crest, he has a patch.
This is real. Or does he have, is the crest real or not?
In my story?
In your story, it's real.
Yes.
Yes.
In my story, it's real. And in real life, it's also real.
Okay.
So John Smith was crazy.
Yeah.
One of those guys with abnormally high testosterone levels. And, just a funny guy. He was going to get hung. He was going to be hung for mutiny on arrival in the New World, except for when they arrived, the captain of the ship had to open the letter, their orders for what to happen in the New World, and it put John Smith in charge. He was literally locked up in the bottom of the boat to be executed upon arrival, and then became governor. And had the whole Pocahontas thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, John Smith was a mercenary, and he fought in the Muslim wars of the early modern era on the frontier of Ottoman expansion. And on 3 different occasions, there were battles to be decided by single combat between the Ottomans and the Christians.
Yeah.
And John Smith, on all 3 of those occasions, Virginia John Smith, Pocahontas John Smith, in European wars, was sent out 3 different times as the champion. And 3 different times he decapitated the enemy. So he was 3-0 there, and was then given a family crest that was 3 severed heads, very gruesome.
Yeah. And
so Cyrus and Antigone Smith tap into their legacy here and find this old family patch that's been banned by the order. It's as distasteful.
Yeah, right.
It's like you can't have the old Smith patch with the 3 severed heads.
Yeah.
Radu Bey, I have a lead villain. Vlad Dracul, the Dracula.
Yeah.
Real guy.
Yeah.
Horrible guy.
Yeah.
Real guy.
Impaled.
He's in the stories.
Vlad the Impaler.
What most people don't know is that his actual brother converted to Islam and was the commander of the Janissaries, brutal Navy SEAL Ottoman fighters. And so Dracula's brother became a Muslim. It was the commander of the Janissaries for the Sultan, and he's the one who invaded his brother's kingdom and killed his brother. And his name was Radu Bey. And that was Dracula's brother. So Radu Bey is in the story. Vlad Dracul is in the story. And I'm pulling all sorts of stuff. John Smith's actual epitaph, I just pulled the real one with slight variations. The crest is the historic crest, but with a different backstory.
Right.
I pull all sorts of things.
You're blending these sort of things.
As many as possible, down to and including the fact that Cyrus and Antigone Smith are descended from a union of an explorer and a native princess. Right. Which echoes John Smith's narrative, but it went a different direction.
So it seems like one of the things that, so you're reading this, and because of the realism of the history and the mythology, one of the things it seems like you're trying to do is get people who read it, get kids especially, to want to, A, go explore stuff, because it's this order of explorers, and B, get into old books, like to get really, languages and books, and so back to that education question, all this, oh, you have to go to school and you have to read. It's like, yeah, but this is the sort of stuff that you might discover. There's stuff out there that's really amazing, these kind of stories.
There are physical and academic requirements for these kids in this order of explorers, and it was very important to me that they be achievable and real.
Right.
So like that these kids had to be, these are things that could be done. You could train to do them. Because no matter what, if you get really into Harry Potter, all you can do is wear a costume in a basement.
Yeah. And wave a stick at each other.
And play a game, and and Nefertiti, and nothing happens. And I wanted to have kids who get swept up in this fantasy adventure.
Right, get really into it.
But where every skill they achieve, everything they learn, everything they can do is doable.
Right.
You can go do what they did. You can go train and learn to do what they did. You can study and learn what they learned.
Yeah.
And that was important to me. And the feedback I've gotten from readers has been really gratifying. Where I've gotten a lot of letters from kids who are just all in.
Yeah.
Like all in on Latin and history and going above and beyond, and then physically training.
Yeah, right. So
that makes me happy.
I'm reading these, to get ready for this again, and you've got a scene where Rupert Greaves, who's the keeper, the Evangel, he's
the Blood Avenger.
The Blood Avenger of Ashtown, and he's one of the protagonists, and he's mentoring Cyrus, and they're about to go into this kind of dark, the belly, the plumbing basically of Ashtown, and he basically says, you need to count your steps as you go. And so I'm going to go, and you got to keep up with me. Count your steps and memorize. 15 steps down, take a left. 14 steps down, because it's pitch black. And I'm reading this, going, yeah, I kind of want to do that. I'm sitting there, like, kind of wanting to walk. See, how many steps is it from work? From our offices are over here to walk back.
Yeah. When could you run it blindfolded?
Yeah. When can I run it blindfolded? And so it struck me as like I could see. So my kids, are still they're only 3 and 5. But I'm like, that's going to be really exciting, like, because you can. It's easy to say, hey, you can learn how to do this.
Yeah.
This is real. One of the things, though, in the books is that Cyrus has kind of a problem with authority.
Maybe.
Likes to push boundaries a little bit.
Sure. If that's your interpretation.
Yeah, that's that. He kind of reminded me, like, what I can imagine a 12-year-old Nate Wilson being like a little bit. Is that true? I mean, in other words, is some of that coming out of, like,
I never glued my locker shut.
You never glued your locker shut, but did you sink your, tests in the bottom of some creek?
Oh, yeah. I threw,
Okay.
No, it's...
So there's some self-identification with Cyrus.
Absolutely. I've never done that with the character until Cyrus.
Okay.
And it was easy for me to do because I was the 5th grade kid who just decided he'd learned enough. Like,
I'm done.
Got all my life skills.
Yeah.
And and I quit school. I just cold turkeyed it. And boy, that was a glorious week.
Yeah, that's right.
So I cold turkeyed school. The teacher let my parents know. My dad sat me down and wanted to know what was going on. And it was just like, I'm done. Thanks.
Thanks for this
Thanks,
education.
Mom and Dad. It's been great. But I've learned it, I think, sufficiently. And he told me, no, you need to do your homework again. You must do it. So I did. And I took it all to school and I threw it away. And that was another glorious week. And the teacher contacted my parents and said, he's still not turning anything in. And he sat me down and I said, I did all of it. I did it, but you never said I had to turn it in. Like, I don't care about grades.
That's
I don't
right.
care about the affirmation of my 5th grade teacher.
Right.
How noble of me. It was, so yeah, there's self-identification.
I don't want to be a people pleaser, Dad.
Yes.
That's right.
I don't live for man. So the thing that's hilarious is that now my oldest son, my oldest daughter, and my second daughter is currently in the 5th grade and currently has my 5th grade teacher. And all 3 of them have. So they're all sitting there, and he has told some fun stories.
That's right, your dad.
So he's an amazing teacher, and he's pulled out like homework assignments I did from 5th grade and let my kids compare.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, come on.
Come on, man. That's not fair.
But there were things that discovered my 5th grade year, like no sneaking off campus, to the car wash, to pressure wash your friends.
Yeah.
Stay off the roof of the school. Things like that all happened right around that time.
Yeah. So I'm reading these books, and I'm like, Cyrus is pushing boundaries. He kind of disobeys periodically. And it seems like in some ways there's an affirmation of a certain kind of disobedience.
Yeah.
So we normally think, I want to teach my kids to obey. And it seems like part of what you're doing in this story is saying it's not quite that simple as just teach your kids to obey.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yes, but the thing is, he does obey the people that
He should.
he should.
Right.
But there are people who are in authority who demand things of his conscience that they cannot demand.
He shouldn't
They don't
give.
have the authority to bind the conscience in that way.
Right. So one of the things, what I felt in reading it was we want to teach our kids to obey, and we also want to teach the right kind of disobedience. We want to teach them to resist certain kinds of authority figures. But that's actually a good thing for us to do as Christians. And if we just read a story and say, "Oh, this kid's disobeying," I don't want them to emulate this character because he's disobeying authority. Well, it's what's the authority requiring of them? That's the kind of question that we ought to be asking.
My dad always used the phrase "sweet defiance."
Okay.
I was like, there's a time for sweet defiance. It's not a bad attitude defiance.
Right.
There's a time for a refusal to comply.
Okay.
And it always comes when the conscience is being bound in ways that it
shouldn't be.
Yeah. Although he is just a punk who needs to learn his lesson sometimes.
Right. He does, and sounds like maybe that you had to learn.
I
some
also
of those
learned
too.
some lessons.
You were also the punk that did that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It all peaked at the use of my BB gun in my bedroom.
Right.
That's where it all stopped. The corner was turned.
You crossed it.
Yeah, it involved a big leather belt.
So maybe one more question, then two more questions here before we kind of wrap up. One is fatherlessness shows up in your writing quite a bit. So both in your fiction, I think all of them to one degree have absent fathers, dead fathers, all this kind of stuff, which is a little surprising because you've got a father, you've got a great relationship with him even now. So what's up with that? Where's the why key in on your characters repeatedly are going to have tough times with their fathers? Oftentimes they find surrogates of some kind.
Yeah. The reason why is because, like, back to the cook analogy, when you look out, your storytelling has to be about what people need. Mm-hmm. And in our culture, in our time, fatherlessness is like the great disease for children. Yeah. Like abdicating fathers, absent fathers, unfaithful fathers.
Right.
That is like one of the throbbing wounds in our culture. And so if I can feed that hunger, it's like if I can feed that starvation, that particular hunger, and try to, especially because it's hard to break that cycle.
Right.
So showing them nobility. I mean, there are many kids in this world where the most courageous, noble, faithful friends they ever had are in fiction.
Right.
That's unfortunately the truth.
Yeah.
But those relationships are real.
Yeah.
So when a kid is seeing somebody go through harder things than they've gone through, and seeing them, like I've said, honor the honorable and damn the damnable, and do what's required of them, and also see where they feed and what to respect and what to disrespect,
right?
And to try to touch this nerve, to give them a balm, somewhat. I mean, the goal is to make the food that's needed. So if we didn't have that situation culturally, I doubt I would be doing it. Yeah. It's not about me and my dad.
Yeah, you're not working through your issues.
I'm not trying to again. It's not the cape and bray. I'm not like what's in my rib cage that I could write about. It's what's needed out there.
Okay. Last question. So we've been promised an Ashtown of some kind. What else are you working on?
The Silent Bells.
The Silent Bells.
Yes.
Silent Bells is coming. What else are you working on in various capacities that we can look forward to?
Currently I'm just destroying my sleep schedule.
Okay.
But it'll last for a little while. I'm working on another 100 covers novel. It's kind of like a standalone. It's kind of it's a standalone prequel.
Okay.
Ish.
Okay.
So that's on a front burner.
Okay.
Ashtown 4 is on the front burner for me. I have a new series launching with HarperCollins called The Outlaws of Time. And the book one's called The Legend of Sam Miracle. And
that one's done.
That one's all written, but it'll be out in the spring. Next spring.
Okay.
So I have to go through the copy edits. So that's there. So Ashtown 4, a standalone cupboards novel. This new series I'm launching. Finishing up this feature film called The River Thief. Right now we're in post-production on, so we'll be done and screening it.
And will that be released in theater? I mean, like, how does that work? I don't even know how the...
Well, we have to finish it. It's an independent film. So once we're done,
then you start trying to shop it.
And if studios think they could make money on it,
then we'll
have conversations. Okay. Yeah. So that's been great. It's been a great experience. And starting a documentary, kind of a global nature documentary called The Riot and the Dance. where
yeah.
we're hopping around the globe doing a lot of high-end nature videography.
Okay.
Fun creatures.
And then C.S. Lewis project too.
Great
right?
Divorce by C.S. Lewis, which is the operating title for the screenplay is Greytown.
Okay.
And that one I've written, that screenplay is done, and we've got some production partners that we're working with, and that ball continues to move slowly because it's a very expensive one.
Right. So
So it's an expensive project. But hopefully within a year we'll know something there. So C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce, this documentary, and then finishing up this feature film, and then all the books.
very good.
And some work of nonfiction somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like a lot. Keep you busy. And thank you very much for being
Thank
here
you.
with us. You'll be back tomorrow. So for those of you, we encourage you to come back. And Nate's going to talk more about stories, telling stories.
Without these rude interruptions.
Without this other guy who just kind of gets in the way of all the stuff. And along with some of our other faculty who'll be presenting. And so we encourage you to come back. He'll be out there for a little bit to sign some books. And you can come up, shake his hand, and ask the question that I should have asked but didn't. And other than that, we're very grateful for your presence. And why don't you thank Nate for being with us?
Thank you.